Hey guys, it's Danny. Today, it's repot time. I have this little Cattleya for a little while now. It has been sent by one of my lovely viewers as a very tiny back division from their own plant. I think it kind of detached from their own plant, if I remember correctly, and they sent it to me, and I'm so grateful because it's a lovely orchid, and I've been recouping it ever since. And look at it. When I received it, it only had these tiny little growths, which you can barely see. It matured to this growth in my care, and now it's producing 2 new growths, and it's running out of space. I think you can tell we're a little crowded in the pot. The roots are slightly crowded. Now, that's not necessarily a problem, but it's kind of drying too fast. It has started to, and it always gets dehydrated. If you look at the mature pseudobulb here, do we see some wrinkles? Yeah, it's drying out way too fast for my particular possibilities. So I need to repot it in a bigger pot. And I will take you along because it's a nice opportunity to see how the roots developed in moss and how I'm gonna go about it. Righty, so before we start, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it. It really helps it out. Why not subscribe? It is free and I post multiple times a week. But if you're feeling extra about it, consider further supporting my channel by becoming a member, using the affiliate links down below, checking out the merch, or using the super thanks option again below my videos. Righty, let's start. I need my tray. I have not used my tray in a while because I have not repotted anything in a while. How about that? And I think I had some gloves somewhere. Let me go find them. There we go, we have the gloves. And by the way, I do get questions sometimes. Some comments more genuine, some more snarky. Are gloves really necessary? When you have a skin condition, they are. But for the orchid, no, it's not necessary. You're not gonna make it sick or anything. So, I didn't tell you who this little lady is. Right, I also wrote on the tag who I got it from. I got it from Maya, which is something that I will start to do. And I potted this orchid in April of 2022. And this is Star Carnival Sirius. It is a beautiful pinwheel pattern type of orchid, which I adore, I love. Very rarely do we see these types of flowers. So what I did was I placed the little back division into sphagnum moss. You can see bark on the top, but in the pot, as you'll see, it's just sphagnum moss. I don't remember if it had too many roots. It doesn't matter really because roots will be created. And moss is a great medium to promote root production because it offers humidity, especially in a dry environment. In a wet environment, it can be too much, but in my oven, moss is just what the doctor ordered. And pretty much, I do the same things as with any other repotting. I squeeze a little bit on the top to make sure that any root that might have grown along the pot detaches really fast. And then I pull up and here we go. Since this moss is pretty new, it's supposed to last for 3 years, I can even let it be. But the bark on the top, I need to remove as much as possible because the brand of bark that I use is not the best type. It's not like Orchiata, but it's affordable and it's what I have around. I don't need to pay transport for it, right? So even though it does degrade faster than this sphagnum moss and much faster than other types of bark, it's still okay for me. I still use it. But this bark is degraded. I need to remove it. So gave it a little bit of a sniff test. It smells wonderful. It smells like the first day of use, this moss. Which, you know what? I will leave. And this, just because this orchid still has growing to do. The pot that I'm gonna use is gonna be slightly larger. It's not gonna be the end result or forever home, quote unquote. It's still gonna be a transition type of pot. So I'm gonna leave this on because I will need to, again, repot maybe in a year because it will outgrow that pot as well. If it were the forever pot, yeah, I would remove the moss because I don't want to disturb this orchid every year. I want to disturb it every 2-3 years. Yeah, the moss can handle 3 years. I plan to, again, repot in about a year. I'm going to leave the moss be a little economical. But the bark needs to go. It does not look good. And actually, the bark is the hardest to remove because it gets stuck to the roots. So I'm going to remove it where I can remove it gently, and where I cannot, I'm just going to let it be. But it's so degraded and mushy that it just comes off. Easy peasy, you guys. Nothing to it. If everything was bark, it would have been much more complicated or time consuming. Now, when trying to promote root production, I typically do not use miracle potions. I like to call them like that. Boosters, additives, whatever they want to call themselves. I don't use them because I believe the orchids already have the hormonal balance and the capability and the genetic programming to start developing what they need to develop. If they need roots, they will start developing roots. Obviously, if the season is right. Particularly with Cattleyas, some of them have growing seasons, blooming seasons. It's a little bit tricky. No matter if you use additives, they will just refuse to produce roots if it's not the season. But not all Cattleyas are like that. And this one seems to be a continuous grower, produces roots and growths throughout the year, no matter the season. So in this particular instance, it is genetically programmed to produce roots. In my opinion, and for me, these additives are useless. Spoilers, it's just an opinion, it's not fact. I might be wrong, but it is just what I believe. So I don't use any additives or potions or anything to promote new roots. What I do try to keep in mind, and we've talked about this in a different video, is that new roots really like higher humidity. Root tips grow much better in a more high humidity environment, even Cattleyas, which are very drought tolerant. So if the air around the roots is too dry, I notice they kind of tend to stop growing. Even in the pot, if you don't water as frequent as they need, those root tips seem to not grow continuously and nicely. They just seem to stop, and then at some point maybe grow again and then just stop again, and so on. So it's not ideal to keep them very dry, and particularly with more sensitive orchids such as seedlings or these back divisions or sick or rootless orchids, it is important to provide humidity around the roots, which sphagnum moss absolutely does. So really, in this case and in all other cases, I don't do anything other than pluck them in moss. Now, does this mean you should do the same? Not necessarily. If you don't get along with moss, don't use moss. Use whatever type of potting mix you like, but just make sure that at least at the surface, you maintain things slightly more humid, which is a little bit hard because the top of the pot usually dries faster. So maybe spray from time to time the pot just to provide that humidity that is always constant around the roots. It will make the roots grow better. The root tips will not stop growing pretty much. Right, let me get a pot and we'll continue this after. What pot do I want? I have them all here. All right, so the pot that I'm gonna use is this one. Quite a bit of an upgrade, but once we place the orchid inside, we can see that it's really not such a big upgrade. So within a year and a half, I suspect we're gonna have to repot again. And I'm gonna keep the moss around the roots, not gonna disturb anything, and I'm gonna add just a little bit more moss. Again, very, very, very fluffy. The key to using moss, no matter the environment, is to make it fluffy. Moss can get compacted quite easily, and the more compacted it is, the less air pockets it has, the more it can become suffocating for the orchid, particularly because it can hold on to that water, which clogs air pockets as well. So it's a bit of a learning curve with the moss, but it is so good, you guys. So helpful in this environment. So I just placed a little bit of moss, you saw, on the bottom. Very fluffy, very nice. Put the orchid inside. Fits perfectly. I want some slow release fertilizer. Initially, I did not use slow release fertilizer because the orchid was very tiny. It doesn't eat, quote unquote, that much. And if I overdo it, which is easy in these spots, if I overdo it with the fertilizer, I might damage the root tips. I don't know how sensitive this orchid is. Some orchids are just, give me all the fertilizer you got, I don't care. And some orchids are just a little bit more sensitive. Don't know this orchid, or I didn't know her. Turns out she's vigorous. So with this one, I relied on the water-soluble fertilizer, but now I think it's absolutely safe to add a few slow release beads. It's gonna help out because she's getting a big lady. There we go. And since she will require more and more support for growth, she's also started to grow much faster because she has a great root system. Now it's when she needs more fertilizer. So I'm just going to place some sphagnum moss around the roots. You can see we have quite a bit of a gap between the initial root ball or sphagnum moss ball and the sides of the pot. Let's get more sphagnum moss here. So I'm gonna cover that air gap here slightly with some sphagnum moss. There we go. Not a whole lot, to be fully honest. Really, all I want from this moss is to maintain moisture around the roots, maintain them humid. I don't want all the moss to touch the roots necessarily. So I didn't have to add too much moss for this pot. I want to keep it airy. Maybe just one more strand here. And I'm gonna finish off again with some bark because I want to shade the top part of this mixture of the sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss, being that it stays wet for so long, it is prone to accumulating algae, and in my area, for whatever reason, cyanobacteria proliferates. And since I cannot limit fertilizer from the orchid and I cannot limit moisture, which are two of the three things cyanobacteria likes, I'm left with light. I can only limit light to prevent cyanobacteria. So that's what I'm doing. It's easy. It does not impair the growth of the orchid. The roots do not need to photosynthesize. They can, but they just don't need to. They're not specialized in photosynthesis. The leaves are. The roots will just not have chlorophyll, but they will perform absolutely fine. They will absorb water, they will absorb nutrients, they will just not photosynthesize. We don't need photosynthesis from the roots. So shading the top portion of the pot prevents cyanobacteria from forming at the top, and since I'm using opaque pots, it will not form within the pot either. Now, back in Romania, did not have major issues with algae and cyanobacteria, but here I do. It's just one of the perks of this environment, so kind of need to adapt. And this is one way of going about it, not necessary for you to use the top layer. If you like it, you can. And there we go, that's about it. I don't need to water this orchid because the moss was wet, and I just watered my orchids 2 days ago or so. So the initial moss was already wet. No need to run water through the pot or anything of the sort. What I will do is add a date to this tag yet again, just to know when I repotted and added slow release fertilizer. This is January now, and we are all done. I just need to find a decorative pot, and that is it. There were a few more things that I wanted to address. What were they? Here's one somebody actually asked a few days ago. Won't the decorative pot impair airflow and air circulation in the pot? Well, in my case, the decorative pot is the least of my worries, right? But even if you're using the traditional transparent pots with extra ventilation holes, as long as you're using a decorative pot which is bigger than your orchid pot, so you have room on the sides for air, you should be absolutely just fine. It really doesn't restrict airflow as much as you'd imagine. That's one. Second, as I was saying, yes, this is the least of my worries. Look what pots I'm using. Again, because I live in an oven, I can get away with it. But how does this pot get aerated, right? Because it has no extra ventilation holes. Well, it does get aerated by the motion of filling the air pockets with water and then letting them dry. This is not a vacuum. We cannot prevent air from entering this pot. It's really hard to create a vacuum, generally speaking. The air pockets can be clogged indeed with compression, which is not the case, and also with water. Because I let my pots dry out, the air pockets go through a motion of getting full and then the water slowly evaporating, sucking in air in those air pockets, air from the outside. So that motion alone aerates the pot, introduces new air in the pot. So I don't have issues with root suffocation and things of the sorts. You guys know I've used in the past all sorts of types of pots and I think they are great. They work just fine. I had absolutely fantastic results with all of those pots. The only difference between this and the traditional pots that I used to use is the amount of work that I need to put into maintaining something like this. This is minimal because I don't have a lot of water evaporation, while a traditional pot requires a little bit more work for me, a little bit more time invested and attention and things of the sorts. That's the only difference. Other than that, things perform just as well. Enough blabbing, time to go because I have some other videos to film today. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, and if you're into aquariums, visit my aquarium channel linked down below. Alrighty, so that's it. I'll see you next time. Bye!